months ago, I gave a sermon about a high-ranking government official who claimed that Christianity tells us that we are to share our love in a concentric hierarchy, meaning that those who are in our circle closer to us, well, they're going to get the love first. And then as we move out into outer circles, if there's some love left, well, then we can give that too. This public proclamation by this official drew the rebuke and correction from 2 popes. If you want to hear more detail about this, you can, and you're watching on YouTube, the links are below. If you're not, the sermon title was God Cannot Be Domesticated. You can look it up on YouTube or one of the other channels that we have. What happens when we show love outside of our circle? What happens when love and hope are shared with people outside the boundaries? People that the world would say don't deserve it. Now, Matthew records Jesus saying this: if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? So what happens when we follow the urging of Jesus to love outside of established boundaries? We're going to look at that today in our reading from 2 Kings. We're going to see an example there. Now, the books of Kings and Chronicles are referred to as the history books of the Bible. This part of 2 Kings is focused on the work and life of the prophet Elisha. Now, Elisha took the role of the head prophet after his predecessor, Elijah, got called home. Yeah, it would be easier if they differentiated their names a little bit. Okay? But it could be worse. It could be more confusing. At Calvary Lutheran in North Richland Hills, both pastors are named Kyle. Elisha is part of today's reading, but he is not central. We're going to take a look at the reading in a different way today. You've heard Julie read the reading this morning, and we're going to look at the reading considering the characters, starting with the ones who showed the least love outside the circle, and then moving to the ones that show the most love outside their circles. Of course, this is subjective, but I offer this approach to help spur our own thought and reflection, not only on how to love those that may be considered outside, but also to consider those who are outside, how we show them love and they show love to us. So we're going to start off this look with the king of Israel. Now, he's not mentioned by name, only by title. And we hear he gets an official letter. Letter is from King Aram of Syria. Now, this was not an invitation to a grand ball. This was not nor was it a declaration of war. The letter said that King Aram has some important person coming to the king of Israel, and he would like that person to be cured of their skin disease. The king of Israel reacts in fear. Why? One would think that the king of Israel would react with some faith, saying, yes, God is powerful and God can heal this person coming to us. That would be consistent with some Bible stories. Or the king of Israel could say, oh man, we can't cure skin disease. That would also be consistent with some Bible stories. The king of Israel does not react in either of these ways. The king of Israel reacts in fear and severe distress. He rips his clothes. That's a sign of mourning. That's a sign of deep distress. You see, Israel had been beaten militarily by Syria, and perhaps the Israelite king thought, oh, this letter is a ploy for the king of Aram to provoke more war. The Israel king is thinking, Aram's going to send this man. We're not going to heal him. Aram's going to get mad and attack us again. Yeah, I suppose this could be stress-inducing. King of Israel is not perceiving love from Syria, and his fear is preventing him from showing any love. Next, we have the star character from 2 Kings, Elisha. Yet, Elisha doesn't have a big role here. Doesn't have a big role. Elisha is not even quoted as speaking in this reading. He only converses through messengers. Now, one can imagine Elisha hearing the king of Israel tearing his clothes and then just rolling his eyes and shaking his head. Elisha then sends a message to the king saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come and let him learn that there's a prophet in Israel." Now, perhaps this sounds maybe a little pompous, a little arrogant to our modern ears. Now, Elisha and his predecessor Elijah, are regarded as great prophets of God, but they're not beyond reproach and critique because they are human. However, I'm going to defend Elisha's response here. Elisha says that Aram will learn that there is a prophet in Israel. Now, Elisha is not saying that, hey, check out our country. We got ourselves a prophet. No, every nation had prophets. Actually, Israel probably had other prophets at this time. These were prophets that served the king, called a court prophet. Most of the time, kind of a good gig. You hung out in the royal court, gave some advice to the king, and things were going good as long as the king liked what you had to say. The king didn't like what you have to say, not so good. You could lose your job, and you could even lose more. So, what Elisha was saying is not that Israel had a prophet. Elisha was saying that Israel has a prophet of God. Not just a court prophet, but a prophet of God. He was proclaiming something without really saying many words. Sticking with Elisha, the man from King Aram, Naaman, needs healing, shows up. Elisha, once again, does not speak directly. He doesn't even leave his house. Elisha sends a message to Naaman and says, wash this many times in this river, and you are good to go. Bye-bye. Elisha does all the work of God by showing up, but not showing up visibly. Elisha does the work for the God and the kingdom behind the scenes in this story. Now we're going to move from Elisha to Naaman's wife. She hears about the possibility of a healing from someone in this nation, this vanquished nation of Israel, and perhaps out of desperation, but maybe with an openness of heart, she urges her suffering husband to find a way to get to this prophet and get this healing. She had enough hope in her source of information that she pinned hope on her husband, and she pinned the hope on this person she only just heard about. Next, we have Naaman's servants, or Naaman's slaves. They come into the picture after Naaman gets the instruction from Elisha's messenger. Now, Naaman's servants, Naaman's slaves could have just done their job. They could have been quiet. They could have just listened as their master ranted about having his ego bruised. They could have just looked to the ground as Naaman went on and on about how important he was and how he shouldn't have been treated in this way. But the servants did not keep quiet. They approached Naaman, apparently with much respect and deference, an act that took courage and love. Now, love was not required by a subordinate to a superior, but respect was. However, love was needed to be bold and take a risk. The servants pointed out Naaman had nothing to lose by following the instructions of Elisha. They told him that he would gladly have done something big, something difficult, if that's what was asked for to receive the healing. Well, why not try the simple thing? Once again, respect and love. Love was not required by the social contract, only respect. Now we're up to the penultimate character in our story. We have the title character Naaman. Naaman is a general in the Syrian army. Our story starts out with a couple of maybe confusing sentences describing Naaman. We learn that he's in favor with his master, the king of Aram, King Aram, because he had a victory, probably over Israel. The victory, however, was attributed to the Lord, attributed to God. He is described as a great warrior with a skin disease. Now, perhaps a reader at this point could say that the skin disease, well, that's a reward for opposing Israel. That's what you get. However, that's not what happens here. And that's not how most of the Bible works. Even more, the text tells us that it was the Lord that was behind the victory of Naaman. Now, in our modern world, there's some in the Christian world who say Christians must support the government of Israel no matter what they do. The Bible doesn't say that. The Bible has numerous situations, such as the one in our text is situated in, where Israel is conquered, and the prophets say that conquering, that's because Israel is not doing what is moral and right and just, and is not doing what is right in the sight of God. Now, like every other nation on earth, Israel deserves love and respect. Sometimes that love and respect is praise for doing what is right and just and moral and gracious. Sometimes that love and respect is calling out, opposing, and protesting what is immoral, unjust, and inequitable. Now let's go back to Naaman. Naaman, urged by his wife to ask if he can go to the prophet in Israel, seems to be a delicate situation. It appears that Syria has not fully conquered Israel, and maybe King Aram doesn't want to start any more military work right now. But Naaman gets permission to visit the prophet, and Naaman's hoping for, some sort of fancy ceremony. At least some sort of meeting. Naaman is hoping for an encounter filled with the respect that he is due. Naaman does not get what he's hoping for. Nope. Naaman does not get what he expects. Naaman does not think it's worth the risk. However, Naaman gets more than he expects in a way that defies social convention, and more importantly, in a way that defies his own ego. God's love, God's grace, God's healing told Naaman's ego through his slaves that his ego would have to step aside and he would have to get into that dirty river in order to have the healing that he desired. Now, is God telling our ego to step aside and get into what looks to be a dirty river of something we would look away from in order to get the healing of our souls, of our hearts, of our minds and bodies that we long for? Is God asking us to go outside of our inner circles to find grace and love in a place that is both out there but also in here? Now we have just one character left in this story. We have the one that took the greatest risk. The one that showed love to people that did not deserve love. This character has no name and is smack dab at the bottom of the social ladder. I'm talking about the slave girl serving Naaman's wife who was captured from Israel. Imagine the courage and love in her heart to suggest to people that captured her and enslaved her that help was available to them in her homeland through a prophet of God. How big was her faith? Believing that the prophet had the hand of God and could do the miracles. Now, the risk was high. What if the prophet couldn't deliver? What if the healing wouldn't happen? What would happen to her? You see, her faith was stronger than fear. How did she overcome her hatred and animosity toward those who held her captive and took freedom from her? How did she show love to those who did not deserve it? She was strong, so strong. The love of Christ, the grace of God, and the urging of the Holy Spirit, may they give us strength to go outside of our inner circles. May we get the strength to love those who are far from us as we should love ourselves. Loving is not easy. Loving ourselves is not easy. Loving others is not easy. Yet, that is what we are commanded to do because it is what makes us thrive as human beings and as a society. Love, it is truly all you need.